Welcome to My Latest Fixation. I'm Joshua, and I'm constantly challenging myself to look at this beautifully warped world through a slightly different lens. From the lonely cryptids lurking into the static to the social mysteries of the digital age, like why our online friends never quite look the way we expect them to. This is my way of deconstructing horror, gaming, obscure history, and the wonderfully strange puzzle of human connection. So pull up a chair, put your headphones in, and let's learn something. So, welcome back. We're continuing our conversation from last time talking about third places, and I ended last episode by talking about the one desk paradox. So, we talked a little bit about historical buildings. We talked about, the 17th century, the rise of coffee, some of the critiques of it. And now we, in 2026, have the one desk paradox, which is you sit at your desk in your bedroom or living room or office or wherever, and that's home, right? That's you chill out there and everything. Well, if you work from home, you open your laptop and answer Slack messages at the same desk, the same computer. And then for social stuff, when you close your work tabs, you open Discord or a game or whatever, and you're in the same desk, in the same chair, at the same monitor. So this feels like a massive psychological strain. We have a stimulation of a coffee house where we don't have the movement, the physicality of a third place. So Laura, I'm going to hit the ground running with this. Do you think a digital space can ever truly fully fulfill those 8 pillars if we never actually leave our first place to get there?
I think we talked in the last episode about how it's so hard to check all 8 boxes for these pillars. And so I don't think that the virtual space can really check all 8 of those. However, I feel like a lot of places can't necessarily check all 8 of those. I don't have as much experience with the gaming aspect of the virtual scene. But I do work a lot from home, and I've also gone through grad school that was primarily virtual and different professional things virtually. And so I do think that for me, one of the biggest differences is having them in different spaces. And so before I moved to the place I am currently, I was truly it had a desk in the same room that I had my bed, and I was sitting there all the time doing work and then closing a laptop and then going about my life, and that was so hard to keep things separate. But now where I am, I have a dedicated office space, and I do feel that makes a bit of a difference, because I can actually shut the door and then do things, and then I'm really not in my office much unless I'm able to go into work, and so I'm able to kind of make that mindset shift. But I think to your point, so many people, your setup is in one spot, and so everything you do that's going to be virtual is going to be in that setup spot.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, mine is set up in my dining room, which is fine, but also creates some very interesting technical issues, such as
when the dog's eating dinner and you're trying to record.
Or the cat jumps down onto the ground and you hear a loud thud. Or, a lot of times I've been listening back to my previous recordings and I sound like I'm really far away from the mic and there's a ton of echo. Has a lot to do with the treatment of the room. Mm-hmm. But even beyond that, it is a very interesting trade-off because, we do have these sort of digital third places, and you do get a lot of those pillars checked. You still get your leveler. So I'm going to use the example of a game I play called Helldivers 2, right?
Sure.
So in Helldivers, no one knows your title or your rank. They just see your level of player and your contribution, right? So there's no physical anchor, but you are all working towards a unified objective. Now, there is a critique of this, which is it's not necessarily conversation-focused. A lot of times when I'm playing with my friends, we all are on a Discord channel together chatting, so it is sort of you go here and you go here, or hey, let's take this one off. So there is sort of conversation happening, but we're still focused on the stuff at hand. So I guess the question then becomes, if your third place is just another tab on your screen that you use for taxes and emails, do you think that it loses its power to help you decompress?
I think it's missing out on that connection piece that's like so important for people, because I think, again, like as we saw in the hurricane that we talked about last episode, we need connection with other people, and especially when we're going through hard traumatic times or just a really bad day, like you need to be able to connect with other people. um and some people like really love that more than others, or like kind of need that connection more than others. Like I remember when we first met, like getting into some really deep like philosophical like conversations and things like that, and that is just really like not something you see as much when you are like over a screen talking about the game that you're playing and like focused on a certain goal in the game versus like being in a room with someone just like chatting, getting to know someone new.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, even with this, we're using I'm using a digital studio, and
Yeah.
it works out because we know each other and we've met before, we've talked. So I think it like kind of takes care of some of that strain. But I can't imagine trying to have this conversation with somebody for the first time, meeting them, and just like being like, okay, well, there's this sort of physical separation between us, so I don't really know what that look means, or like, being able to, we need that stimuli, the physical stimuli of the environment around us. And not to sound a little woo-woo, but I do think that there's a lot of time that you can read the energy off of somebody when you're in the room. And so when you don't have that physical stimuli of going to this specialized place, right, where you're going to interact and you're going with an open mind and an open concept of wanting to connect with each other, I do think it kind of loses some of its decompression ability. And I do think you're right. I mean, it creates it a little bit less personal. There are some other issues with digital spaces too. Oldenburg talks a little bit about how a physical third place has like opening hours, right? And like hours that are available when you're not at work or at home. Well, with digital ones, a physical third place has opening hours. A digital one is 24/7. It can actually lead to burnout instead of decompression if you're always on it. Yeah. I fall into this trap a lot where I will be, maybe like working on something for work, or I'll be, deep diving a topic, doing research for this, and then I'll immediately go into my Discord to hang out with my friends, and that's great and it's wonderful, and I have a lot of fun still, but there's not this actual act of like decompression between those tasks. And so one of the things I've been trying to do a lot more lately is, one, step away from the computer for a little bit, but also in between doing those things, create a physical reset. Get off the computer, walk away, go make some dinner, go like clean, go, walk around the house, go work out, do something in between those tasks so that it allows my brain the time to process everything I just did, sort of reset, and then go into the next thing that I'm doing. So one of the other things too is digital third places connect us to people with our exact niche interest. They disconnect us from actual neighbors. So we might know somebody living in London better than somebody living in the apartment next door. I'm lucky enough here that my neighbor is really great. I got to meet him like pretty early on, and that's nice. But I have neighbors on the other side who I don't ever talk to. I don't, there's nothing wrong with them. I haven't ever really gotten to talk with them. We see each other passing. Oh, hey, whatever. But we don't. If I was out of like sugar, I would not go over there and be like, hey, can I have some sugar? But with all of this, you study how environments sort of shape behavior. And if I'm understanding correctly, you don't exactly know. But when the environment never changes, right, when you just have sort of this like one desk, what do you think that does to our sense of community?
I think in a way, too, you can be very like intentional in how you portray yourself when you're talking to people online. And so I know you talked about it a little bit about how like you're not able to like kind of build those like social skills that you get when you're in person. I think that is like so evident sometimes, and like sometimes you might have like a person, like I know I'm thinking of one person in particular that I know that has a lot of like online friends but not a lot of in-person friends, because when it gets hard they don't know how to mend a relationship or communicate in a relationship with like someone in person. Online, you can just ghost them for a few days and then either come back or not. And so you can be really specific. You don't have to talk about things that are hard. You can keep things surface level. And so I think that is like part of this like virtual aspect of that as well. I think for like the environment piece, I think when you are kind of limiting your environment, like you don't have as many opportunities to grow your point of view or like your mindset or your experience. Because so much of that is getting out into the world and communicating with people who have different backgrounds from you, who have had a different walk of life than you, and like really being able to talk about those things and like widen your own worldview. And like you don't get that as much when you are like in one spot for a really long time.
I agree. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, but I honestly don't even have the words for it necessarily or know the proper like terminology, but we are in a state of, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but we are in a state of political unrest, right? Sure. And we have, for the first time in a while, some pretty massive divide and pretty extreme one way or the other with this. And I can remember when I was growing up, all those years ago, when I was growing up, my family are all sort of on different sides of the political spectrum, but they never really had an argument that broke the family, right? Mm-hmm. But nowadays, I mean, it seems like it is pretty normal. And I guess I'm kind of wondering, we look at things like, COVID happening and sort of like we had to shift to being isolated. We had to shift, to sort of being by ourselves. And obviously that increased depression and loneliness. But after that, we're still stuck in this sort of digital age using these tools that we used during COVID. And I'm noticing a parallel between people utilizing those tools more and also being less likely to deal with adverse opinions or opinions that are differentiating from their own. I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on that.
Conflict and like communication are definitely things that like we struggle with. Because like it's not comfortable. We want to be around people that believe similar things to us, that like have similar life experiences, and so it isn't like super comfortable to go outside of that, and like that's how you learn and grow as a human. And so I do feel like sometimes there's a lot of it being harder to like sit in that uncomfortable feeling where like before, or like in times where you are face to face, like if you're there in the middle of like a public spot, like you don't really like you have to like be able to cope with it and like to figure it out in the moment. But like virtually, if you don't like what someone's saying, you can turn it off, you can shut your laptop, you can block them. And like that's not super realistic when you're having a face-to-face conversation with someone out in person.
No, I agree. I think that's one of the major downsides about digital third spaces is you don't. I talked a little bit about the soft skills, and you've mentioned it too, but you really don't get the practice on it. And if you're used to being able to just block or ignore or ghost someone, then you're going to start doing that in your everyday life. Yeah. And so I think that's really the importance of these third places that exist, among other things. But I think that is one of the biggest things is that, as we sort of get rid of all of this stuff, and we're starting to noticing it disappearing, like let's look at the actual social lens that it's causing to people. I mean, you're causing people to lose soft skills. Yeah. I mean, I can't remember the article, but I was reading something about one of the things that a lot of jobs are looking for now are soft skills. Yeah. And that's one thing I can say when I was a hiring manager, when I interviewed with people, I talked a lot about conflict management and how people approach this, and that's a huge skill set that's missing is, well, what do you do when, you have somebody that disagrees with you? I'll just walk away. Well, that doesn't, that's fair, but what do you do when you're in a situation where you can't,
You can't.
right?
Or if the person you're disagreeing with is your supervisor. Like,
Right, or
what
your
do you do?
customer. Like, you can't
Yeah.
just be like, "Oh, I'm not going to answer that question. Bye." Like, that's not a thing that happens.
No.
Um,
I do think like something you said a couple minutes ago, I think really like stood out to me. You had talked about using kind of the virtual third space. You had referred to it as a tool, and I think that's like such a key part of the conversation of like I think it's supposed to be used as a tool, but not the only third space that you have. But I feel like what we've gotten into is so many people are using it as the only third space and not as a tool. And I think that is what like kind of brings up some of these like issues that we're talking about.
I would agree. I mean, in a perfect world, right, we would utilize things like Discord or Reddit or whatever to, you know, break the rules of the 90s and actually meet strangers from the internet. Right, but in a perfect world, we would meet these people, befriend them, get to know them, and all of this stuff, and then make plans in the real world, right?
Yeah. Or like again, if people are like far away, like still having that time, but that not being the only time you're ever in a third space or the only time you're ever interacting with people outside of work and like school or whatever it is that you have going on.
I agree. I was lucky enough this past year that some of those friends in that Discord and I decided to all meet up and
Yay.
we rented an Airbnb and we went to the Atlanta Renaissance Festival.
Oh, I bet that was the best.
It was so cool because, you know, some of these friends I've known since college, some of them are relatively new, and it was just this wonderful expansion of my world to just sit down with all of these people and be like, "What? This is wild."
Yeah.
You know, I joke in the intro to the show. I talk about the science of why our friends never look the way we imagine they do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm gonna hopefully get into that at some point. I'm still doing research on it, but that is one of those. That's where that example came from. That's why I used it. Is I met one of my friends that I had never seen a photo of. We had never like video chat, but this is somebody that I played games with regularly and talked with. We had all these like nice philosophical conversations like for months, and then I meet this person in person, and I'm like, oh my god, you look nothing like I imagined. And I told them that, of course, and then they were like, "Yeah, honestly, the same for you. I did not imagine you to be this, person who like is like covered in tattoos and all
Yeah.
this stuff." And I was like, "Thanks." But it's very interesting, and I think there's an argument to be made why places are so important.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I want to talk about too, which is that they're disappearing. We talked about, obviously we can go into like federal funding, things like that, but there is also, have you ever heard, they actually are designing benches now
Oh.
to make it so that you can't lie down.
Yes, I have seen that.
I honestly can't remember the term for it. I'll have to look it up here in a second. But yeah, there's this concept of designing things in a way that make it so you're there temporarily.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand the thought behind it. I'm looking it up real quick, by the way. Let's see, designing things, architecture in an aggressive way. Oh gosh, I need to know what it's called. Oh yeah, okay. It's the term is called hostile architecture.
Okay.
And so there's things like anti-sas ledges, so slanted windowsills or ledges with metal spikes so that you can't sit or lean against it. Benches with armrests placed every 18 inches. They aren't there for your comfort, they're there to ensure that nobody can lie down. We've got pink and blue lights using specific lighting in tunnels or bathrooms to make it difficult to see veins. Well, that's kind of interesting. So to deter drug use. That's kind of an interesting thought. Highlight
Well,
skin
again, I was
imperfection.
thinking through a lot of the like the benches and things like that. I think that's because like people are really trying to dissuade unhoused folks from utilizing like the benches and things, which I know that's a whole different conversation, and I'm sure you and I could like talk more about that piece too and how we feel about that. But in terms of like third spaces, again, it's like I don't know if it's necessarily something that people have in mind when they're like making spaces or like are prioritizing in communities to make sure that there are these like third spaces that could be accessible to everyone.
I agree. So I don't know. I might have told you this. You may or may not know this about me. I used to work for the Tourism Development Authority. I'm not going to say where, but it was in a town. And I used to work there. And I know that that was one of the conversations in that particular town is that there is a lot of, there is an unhoused population. And like, how do we manage this, right? How do we manage those that are choosing this, which people have started calling urban campers, versus somebody who is forced into an unhoused situation? I mean, that is, like you mentioned earlier, I think maybe last episode you mentioned this, but the cost of living is getting astronomical, and we are seeing a massive increase in all of this, right? What I've wondered is we're making all these policies and we're creating this, you know, architecture that's sort of hostile and everything like that. Where is that conversation, right? Where are you actually sitting down and talking with the unhoused person? And I know we kind of don't want to go too much into it, but where is the conversation of like, hey, let's level this, right? Let's create a levelizer here. Let's go to a space where we can both feel comfortable and talk without this feeling like you're being judged. And what solutions can we offer, right? And so I think that really taps into one of the other important things about these third spaces. So I guess I'm going to hit you with a pretty big question. So there is a sociologist, Robert Putnam. He talks about this in Bowling Alone. He talks about how our social capital is shrinking. We've traded a communal bench to a private screen. Our cities are being designed for cars and pass-through traffic rather than for staying traffic. We have hostile architecture designed to keep people moving and luxury price tags that keep the lever of power from ever functioning. So the big question is, what do you think we as a society, why do you think we as a society have started to view free spaces like a park or a library as lesser than paid spaces? And more importantly, how do we change the culture so that the library feels just as essential as a $7 latte shop?
That's a really good question. And kind of the first thing that comes to my mind is the equalizer piece. Because, you know, if someone is paying to be there, then they have enough resources to pay to be there. And so I think that might be a big piece of why it's kind of like more like you know, you can imagine the types of patrons you would see at a local coffee shop versus people that you might run into at like a library. And I think like it's just there's a difference, and people like know that, and I think that impacts their choice of where they spend their time.
I agree. I mean, you have, again, we talk about sort of differentiating opinions. I know you and I are the similar school of thought that people are wonderful and that we love them, and like there are obviously some downsides of that, but I think the positive is that we're always willing to connect with people, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about people choosing somewhere that they're going to spend their money at, right? They are going to choose places that cater more to like their social circle.
Yeah.
And so I think about places like there's this restaurant in Asheville when I lived there. I don't think it's there anymore, unfortunately, but they have this really cool concept, which is that if you walked in and you were hungry and you couldn't afford a meal, they would give it to you. They would comp it to you. And there were no questions asked. It wasn't like, well, you look like you can afford it. Why aren't you? They operated with this honesty first model, of which is that like we are here as a place to give everyone food. And we are here and we operate with a place to give everyone equal sharing of resources, right? And I know that we could probably also spend an entire episode talking about this, of the term equality versus equity. Because obviously they were two very different things. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the question then becomes is like we have these third spaces. Excuse me. We have these third spaces that are sort of being limited more and more, and we've got these places popping up that are sort of mimicking a third space, right? These like coffee shops that are popping up. I'm not going to name any just in case, but you know, these bigger chains that are coming in and sort of, you know, featuring local art, comfy chairs, and all this stuff. But the reality is, they're priced at a point where we really can't have an entire capture of everyone in the community. And so that's something that I think is really interesting. So if we start to see this, we see the old version of third spaces fading, right? And I kind of want to figure out, like, what does version 3 look like, right? Like, what are ways that we could kind of create these micro third places where we don't necessarily need a massive, expensive new building. Sometimes it's just about claiming small corners.
Yeah. I think it depends so much on, like, your community, too. Because potentially, like, the third space that I might go to in my area is probably different than maybe the one that you're going to in yours. And so, like, being able to have more of the, like, flexibility in deciding, like, what makes a third space, and then kind of going from there.
Yeah, well, and I also, I'm sure you've seen this. I've seen it popping up the past couple of years, and I really love them. Have you seen the, like, little free libraries that people...
Yeah, we've got a couple in our neighborhood.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, is like you see like a little free library in your street. There's a community garden where you actually get to meet people. I've started to see a massive increase in CSAs, like community supported agriculture models, which is really cool because when I studied undergrad in Western North Carolina, they have a class called agroecology, where they talk about these different models and like the positives and negatives of them. But CSAs are my personal favorite thing in the entire world. I think they're wonderful. Shop local if you can. But one of the things that you've also started to see is you see these like niche third spaces popping up. And I'm not here at all to say that we shouldn't do that. I think it's really wonderful because what you're actually doing is you're creating a niche sort of echo chamber, right? But you're still getting people in the community involved. And I think the biggest thing that I would love to see happen is if you have something like, let's say, a board game cafe, right? You're going to get people that want to play games, and you're going to get the random people who've drugged their friends to play games, and you're going to sort of start to get the shoulder-to-shoulder stuff. We start to see, you know, we've seen trivia really has increased, especially in, like, breweries and things like that. But then there's still a limiting factor of, like, people that don't drink, right? And so to combat this, we've seen a lot of breweries start coming up with non-alcoholic options too, right? So there are obviously businesses and communities that are trying to incorporate all of this stuff and really trying to create a neutral ground. And so I think that's really where I would love to see most of our society focus is like, let's stop worrying about hostile architecture, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I can see the benefit of having lighting that makes it hard to find a vein for somebody that's using drugs, right? But let's not be hostile. Let's be like more open and inviting, because I think the reality is, you know, if you want to solve social issues like an unhoused population, right? Like, you need to get to the core root and figure out what's going on, and the only way you can do that is if you have an equalizer, right? Where you have a space that people can talk freely. And I think right now we are creating a society that is getting rid of more and more of those spaces, and that's not really helpful either.
Yeah, I feel like as a society, like, so many people are already lacking resources, and regardless of like whatever it is, I know we've named like quite a few things that like could fall under that umbrella, and this is just another resource that's kind of going away or like kind of falling out of people's minds.
So one of the arguments, loud car, hold on. It's crazy that I can hear it in my headset. I have an actual like recording. I was like recording an episode and some car went by with like loud bass, and the people that were recording with me were like, "Brother, what's going on?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "It sounds like the aliens are coming." And I listened back to it, and it's just like this like loud like reverberation, and I was like, "Oh my god, it sounded like they were coming for me." Okay, cool. So, you know, if we're designing a neighborhood from scratch today,
Yes.
Knowing everything that we've kind of learned about the one desk paradox and the need for physical connection, what in your opinion is the one mandatory third place building that you would like to see included to keep a community from falling apart?
Hmm. That's a that's a good question. I think a space with a lot of like variety, or like maybe something that like just doesn't just fall under a brewery or doesn't just fall under a coffee shop, like a place that has like a lot of different options for a lot of different people to like meet the needs that they have. And maybe areas that do have like things to kind of build connections, like I know you mentioned like board game cafe, or like the option to do things like that, or maybe and then maybe have like a bar as well. And so you can kind of choose your own adventure of like, okay, am I feeling like more outgoing today? Do I want to sit at like a bar with other people and like strike up conversations? Or maybe I want to like bring a friend and start a board game and just kind of be off in a corner, but I'm still around other people. Because I think like in having these conversations, we've talked a lot about how like the pillars are hard to like have all eight of them in a spot. And so I think just like trying to do as many as we can, and like more variety, more flexibility in thinking through those things.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't exactly know what shape that building would take place in, but I do
I don't
know.
know.
Say again?
I don't know. I'm like almost imagining, I'm trying to think like I think there's places that I've been to before, and I do think most of the time they're like breweries, but I just have lived in places that have a lot of breweries. But like there's one spot in particular that I'm thinking of that like it has, it's just this big giant building, and it has a bar, it has like tables to sit at that you can order food. It has TVs that you could like watch sports. It has pool tables, and it has an arcade section. So like kids are in there like doing arcade games, or like adults doing arcade games. I definitely did that too. And it has like axe throwing on like one side of the building. And so it has a bunch of different things. It's got a really big parking lot, because like you don't have to pay for parking, which is like a huge thing. And like it's close to the local Walmart, which means like a lot of people are like driving by it often. And so I think I'm thinking of like places like that, that like it's a neighborhood spot that if there's not really anything else to do, you could like go to a spot like that and like find something to do. Whether you just want to like order some pizza and watch the football game that's on TV, or if you want to like do some axe throwing, like whatever you kind of want to do. And so I'm imagining more places like that.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a dream, to be honest with you. I mean, and it checks all of the sort of boxes, like, or at least a lot of the boxes, sort of the niche things that people are into. I think a lot of times when you look at groups of people, we all obviously have our own unique stuff that we identify with, but you kind of covered everything in that little bit. I mean, we talk about sports, we talk about TVs, we talk about board games, we talk about food, we talk about
Mm-hmm.
conversation, drinking, and then obviously the people that don't drink but still have libation. Like
Yeah.
that really is the dream of the third place. Yeah, I think that would be a really cool
Yeah,
concept.
it's a cool spot. And I remember when it like opened, and that was like the first of its kind in like that community, and how cool it was to like just go there and hang out.
I'm trying to think of any places that I know of that are similar to that. And the closest I would have would be the market I talked about going to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's. I think the biggest thing, when we look at things like macro versus micro lenses of communities,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, macro being like the community as a whole, right? Like having a building like that might be incredibly relevant for that area. But then when you look at micro communities such as like suburbs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are, for lack of a better term, the killer of the third place because you're not close to anything.
Yeah.
There's this concept of like the 20-minute walk or bike ride to be able to have somewhere that's accessible. And I think the generation that really it's affecting most, besides, is the youngest generation. I mean, it's obviously affecting people that don't have money for cars and commuting and everything. But I mean, think about when you were young, and you would go outside, and there were places to go and places that you could hang out. I remember my third space growing up, believe it or not, was the mall.
That's a good one.
Because we could go and spend an entire weekend at the mall, just walking around. And in a lot of ways, it checks all of the pillars, which is interesting. Now, as an adult, no, I don't want to go to the mall. I'm good. I went to the mall maybe a month ago, and I was there for maybe 20 minutes, and I was like, I'm ready to go now. I've just, I was so busy. But when I'm thinking back on that, I mean, the reality is that's the last time I saw people of all ages coming together. And I think the downside of it is it's a very commercialized thing.
Yeah, you're not building connection with people. You're like on a mission to find the best deal.
Exactly. And so I would love to see more and more of these like spaces pop up that are sort of multifunctional,
For sure.
and do create an area where everyone can go in and access it. And
Yeah, because even like I'm thinking through like the mall, like little like play area that's in like the food court, and how easy it was as a kid to just like go and start playing, and like other kids would be around, and like how easy it was to just like meet your best friends, like just hanging out, playing around, and then maybe never see that person again, but like for those 20 minutes at the mall, like that was your person, and you were able to play and have a really good time.
It's funny you're talking about this, and all I can think about is there's a video, and here I go referencing social media, but there's this wonderful video of this girl at a drive-through, and she like ordered and was like talking. She goes, "Hey, I have a question," and the person answers, and they're like, "What's up?" And she was like, "Do you want to be best friends?" And she's like, "Yeah, come." Did you pull around? And so they just like start talking, and she's essentially like, "Do you want to like come and do a slumber party and just like be my friend?"
Aww.
And we're talking about two adults, like, and there's so much innocence in that that you just don't get to see much anymore.
You don't ask that question as much anymore, but you did as a kid. Do you want to be my friend? Like that was a common thing, but now it's not when you get older.
Yeah, now it's like, why would I do that? And it's funny. It's like even when like you and I first met, like we had these really nice conversations, and I was like, well, I would consider Laura a friend, but I don't know what to call her. And so like now I'm just like, no, like Laura's my friend. And it's a very, very interesting concept. And I guess the point is, I think if we have more and more of these third places that are accessible, it does sort of start to tackle this massive issue of loneliness that people are often experiencing. And digital spaces, third places, are tools. Like you said, I agree with that. I think that it should be used as a tool. It's going to help you find friends and help you find a community, but I think the more important thing is that we actually create a community.
Yeah.
And so with that, we've covered a lot of ground today, and over the course of these two episodes, we talked about the caffeine-fueled debates of the 1600s to the one-desk paradox we're all living in right now. The reason I wanted to talk about this isn't just because I'm fixated on the history. It's because I think we're losing something vital, and we need to be very, very intentional about getting it back. So for the listeners at home, I have a challenge for you this week. I want you to go out and find your third place. And I don't just mean go to a shop, right? I don't just mean go to the mall. I don't just mean go to, insert coffee shop here and get a coffee to go. I mean actually occupy that space. Put your phone down. The one desk paradox follows us at our pockets. Whether you're at the counter or on a bench, resisting the urge to retreat in that screen is going to be really important. I'd love to see you become a regular. Go to the same spot 2 or 3 times this week. Learn the name of the person behind the counter. Notice the people sitting around you. Strike up a conversation. It doesn't have to be a debate on the Age of Enlightenment. It could be about the weather, the book they're holding, or the fact that the coffee is actually pretty decent today. Remember, a third place is just a room until the regulars show up. We shouldn't have to wait for the power to go out or a hurricane to hit to realize that we need each other. We shouldn't need a disaster to remember how to build a communal fire. So go out there, be a leveler, reclaim the neutral ground. Because even in 2026, the most radical thing you can do is just exist in public with your neighbors.
And with that, the curtain closes on this week's obsession. Thanks for pulling up a chair and diving in the deep end with me. If you'd like to feed the machine and support this strange little show, you could find our tip jar links in the notes below. It's never expected, but it goes a long way towards keeping the ghost happy. And while you're down there, please follow and share the show with another beautifully bizarre soul. It really is the best way to help our corner of the static grow. Have a dark history footnote, a lonely cryptid, or digital mystery you think I need to absolutely fixate on? Send your thoughts via carrier pigeon, or just reach out on Instagram at MyLatestFixationPod, or email me at MyLatestFixationPod@gmail.com. Stay curious, stay obsessed, and I'll catch you in the next one.